Good evening, everyone. This is the Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. My name is Doug Bresk, and I'm the chair of the Planning Board. To my left, we have Nancy Wiley, Vaughn Dugan, Peter Goodwin, Roger Murray, Steve Webster, who's the vice chair. To my right, Shanna Saunders as the interim planner, Kathy Barnard, and Julie Jacobs serving as alternate. Both Julie and Kathy serving as alternates. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing for Atwell on Elm, who have requested a continuance to May 6th. So I'll make a motion to continue that to May 6th.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, very good. The next is our work sessions. The first is the Shorefront Residential District Ordinance. We've received red line copies to go over this evening. And Shanna, do you want to walk us through this?
Absolutely. So I wanted to make this a two-part process. We talked at the last meeting about not only updating the ordinance, but updating the application. The application was determined to be the first priority, but I did not want to update the application without having a full understanding of exactly what the intent of the ordinance was. So I did take a stab at updating the ordinance. Once we come to agreement that the wording of the ordinance is as the board intends it to be, I can update the application to best reflect this interpretation without necessarily having the ordinance in place, and then you guys can move these ordinance changes forward as you see fit. But I do feel like I need to come into complete understanding as to exactly how kind of the interpretation needs to work. So what we talked about the last time, and I might jump around here a little bit because the section on lot redevelopment is kind of key to the way that the rest of the ordinance works. That section is the very last section of the ordinance. It's the section I have the most questions on, so I do want to approach that section last, but we may touch on it as I go through the rest of the changes. So you can see on page 3, under the standards that apply to the 250 foot from the reference line, because if you'll remember, this ordinance is really cut into 3 sections. One that applies to the 250, one that applies to the section between the 50 and the 150, and then one that applies to the section of the 50. So in this section that applies to the 250, it's all about impervious surface. And what we talked about was in number C, so for projects that result in more than 20% impervious, that the waterfront buffer, which is along the 50, it only needs to be reestablished when the projects result in more than 20% impervious. If you remember, I was interpreting it that it needed to be established with any project coming forward. And then we tied this specifically to the requirements of 175-67C, which is that section that relates to the 50-foot section, 50-foot setback. And so if you go to page 6, thank you, yep, that is 175-67C2, and you can see there that the language there then mirrors the 20% impervious section. So it's very clear in the impervious section that it only needs to be reestablished in the 20%, and then it's very clear in the 50-foot from the reference line section that that only applies to the 20% impervious section.
Shanna, could I ask a question on that, please?
Yes.
In C2, the first sentence as you've proposed reads, within 50 feet of the reference line, the existing waterfront buffer must be maintained unless the project will result in more than 20% impervious surface coverage, in which case the buffer must be reestablished. Do we have some reference to what it should be reestablished to?
Yes, so then the rest of that, it talks about how it's reestablished. So then, within the waterfront buffer, tree coverage is managed with these 25 50 by 50 foot grids and point systems.
So it must be reestablished to meet the point system criteria.
Right.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to see that reworded so that it's a little clearer. I have some suggested language, but why don't you go ahead? I have a couple of points that don't really address the substance, but more the verbiage.
So do you want the clarity that it needs to be established per below?
Well, perhaps instead of saying in which case the buffer must be reestablished, could be reworded to say in which case the buffer must meet the point system described below.
Well, yeah, that's something similar. My first question on that was, within 50 feet from the reference line, the existing waterfront buffer must be maintained. What about if the point total exceeds what's required?
So I believe there's another section that speaks to that. Hold on. So on page 7, number 5, if the total tree score in any 25 foot by 50 foot segment exceeds 25 points, then blah, 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 blah.
So you can do what you like as long as you meet the minimum point score.
Right.
So that is only trees.
No, it says shrubs over 3 feet in height.
Right.
Where does it say shrubs?
The second line under number 5, under C5.
Number 5, what page?
C5 on page 7, the second line reads, then trees and shrubs over 3 feet in height may be removed.
That is a good point, though, because reestablishment, I believe, is only trees, 4.5 feet above the ground. Measured by
And that
caliper, I think
table
it's-
is only trees.
is only trees. Correct.
Yeah.
So reestablishment, it does only talk about trees. It does say that you can remove shrubs, however, if you're over the tree point system.
Right.
So I don't know if we want to make
So
that
you're not
clear.
adding shrubs in ground cover, but you're adding trees up to 25 points,
Correct.
which is strange, but that's the way it's been. Yeah.
And then my second question is I would rewrite the end of that sentence. I would stop after must be maintained and then have if a project will result in more than 20% impervious surface coverage.
Where are you, Roger?
Yeah, I'm back on, well, page 6. More than 20% impervious coverage, additional vegetation must be planted to at least achieve the minimum required score, which I think addresses Doug's question, and that's the same language as appears on page 3 where they're talking about reestablishing. Although I don't like reestablishing because it makes it sound as though that you can do some clearing as long as you reestablish, which I don't think is the intent.
Right.
I like the planted better.
But again, in the 50-foot buffer, we're talking trees.
Yep. Well,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So then I made it very clear in section D on page 3 that where a project results in no change or a decrease, it is not required to meet 67B, which is the natural woodlands buffer establishment. And so this was another section where we were having folks meet between the 50-foot and the 150-foot. They had to meet the standards in section B regarding the natural woodlands buffer. But we made it clear at the last meeting that if there was no net change or there was a decrease in the square footage of impervious area, that they were not expected to upgrade that natural woodlands buffer in between the 50 and the 150. So I made that very clear in section D here. So then moving on to that section B, the natural woodlands buffer, that's between the 50-foot and the 150-foot.
This is now on page 4.
Yes, thank you, on page 4. My understanding was that we only wanted those standards to apply for new constructions and where and on lots where the impervious coverage is increasing. So again, if it's staying the same or decreasing, this section does not need to be looked at all. And that's consistent with the application that basically says, what is your existing woodlands buffer now? Okay, you can keep that. Which I thought was inconsistent with this ordinance because section B talks about reestablishing it.
So in the last sentence that you've proposed under B reads, redevelopment lots are exempt from this section as long as impervious coverage is not increased. And I suggest changing as long as to if, to make it simpler.
As long as what? Under the current standards, though, redevelopment, that exemption really applies to a property on which a where an existing non-conforming primary structure exists. So it seems to me the second sentence should read, redevelopment of lots with a pre-existing non-conforming primary structure are exempt from this section as long as the impervious coverage is not increased.
So if there's a single-family home that meets the 50-foot setback, so it's conforming, it meets the side setbacks, it meets the impervious area, but it is increasing. You're saying that that doesn't...
No, it's not increasing in this paragraph, right? If it's increasing, that's a different ball of wax. If it's not increasing impervious, that's this sentence.
Okay. So I think...
I mean, the current one talks about where you have D of the current. It specifically refers to redevelop a property on which a pre-existing non-conforming primary structure exists. And in this case, we had an application come in where, well, it was for the Excelsior Mill property where they tried to suggest that property was being redeveloped, although there were absolutely no structures on it. An argument we didn't buy. But I think redevelopment can be in the eye of the beholder.
And so where was it in that paragraph that you wanted to put the words existing non-conforming?
Okay, I would start the redevelopment sentence, redevelopment of lots with pre-existing non-conforming primary structure are exempt from this section as long as impervious coverage is not increased.
Okay. Okay.
But if you don't have, let's say, a house that is in the buffer, you do have to meet the standard? And I think that's a new thing, but...
Well, I mean, that just says what the current ordinance says. It says any property owner who wishes to redevelop a property on which a pre-existing non-conforming primary structure exists shall submit.
So we're saying redevelopment lots with existing non-conforming primary structures are exempt, but redevelopment lots with conforming primary structures are not exempt?
Well, actually, the current version doesn't address impervious coverage being increased.
Agreed.
Which may address Vaughn's concern or question. Because right now, it's property on which a pre-existing non-conforming primary structure exists. And then it goes through the criteria which
That's
are up for
later.
discussion.
That's the next,
Yeah.
that's page 7.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I understand. If I'm confused, I'll come back with more questions.
But So we may want to look at whether the impervious coverage increase should be in there if we're trying to mimic the current ordinance.
Well, it was all about making it better. That's what our discussion was. So that's why we wanted to make sure that the impervious area decreased.
Or stays the
Question
same.
is, does it matter if the structures are within the setback or not?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy the way it is written here.
On page
4.
6.
4.
4. So that's either with or without footprint in the 50-foot.
Well, it's if there's a pre-existing non-conforming structure, it's exempt as long as the impervious coverage is not increased.
So you're adding those words. So what about
Well,
lots where there is
well-
no pre-existing non-conforming structure?
Then this doesn't apply.
It's not a redevelopment.
Then it's not a redevelopment.
It could be, right? You could be redeveloping a structure that is conforming.
Right.
So when you redevelop a structure that's conforming, what applies? And we can think about it and come back to it.
Then I think the regulations apply without the exemption.
But you're still decreasing impervious coverage, which was our goal.
Well, if you're decreasing the impervious coverage, then you are under then you're under A1D. You're not required to meet 175-67B or to provide a professionally engineered stormwater management plan.
That's a different criteria. That's a stormwater management plan criteria as opposed to plantings. There are lots of different things.
No, it's one, that's this whole section B here on natural woodlands buffer standards.
Well, it does conflate two things. But one is, in one case, it's all about stormwater management, and the other, it's all about plantings.
No, B is not just all about plantings.
But C is, which you're just talking about stormwater.
No, I said 67B is what appears under A1D on page 3.
Sure, but that's, okay, so you're providing stormwater management plan. It doesn't talk about plantings under B.
Yes, it does under B, but that you're exempting pre-existing non-conforming structures, and you're saying that if a project does not increase, or there's no change or decrease in impervious surface, they don't have to do any of this.
So any of this is two different things. The problem is there's stormwater management plans, and then the other thing is plantings.
And D says that if you're not making no change or decreasing impervious surface coverage, you don't have to prepare a professionally engineered stormwater management plan, and you do not have to do the planning set forth in B.
Agreed. I think the question, though, hinges on the non-conforming structure. So if you have a redevelopment lot with a conforming structure, so a raise and rebuild of a conforming structure that meets the 50-foot setback, how do they apply Section B, the natural woodlands buffer? Are they exempt from that because they're a conforming structure, or are they not exempt?
Well, right now, they're exempt if they're exempt from There's a specific exemption with a pre-existing non-conforming primary structure. The current one does not address increasing the impervious coverage in that situation, other than to say that you have to be more nearly conforming. If you look at D of the current ordinance.
Page 4?
Page 4 has the change, and page...
So we're talking about that change. We haven't decided on it yet.
Right. I mean, the question is, if you don't include as long as impervious coverage is not increased, you're saying the exact same thing as the current ordinance. If you do say it, then that is, you're tightening it somewhat, which may actually be part of the discussion about when we get to D, and how we're going to discuss lot redevelopment there.
So why don't we move on to that and maybe come back? And I think that's what I kind of alluded to in the beginning. So I think the intent of section D on page 7, lot redevelopment, was to allow for some exempted area, basically to allow lot redevelopment to happen. However, we don't define what redevelopment is. And so under number 1, I gave several options. So it's not A and B and C and D. We really need to pick one of those or a combination to define what lot redevelopment is. And as you can see, I go from kind of most strict to least strict, or maybe vice versa, but there's raising of structures, and rebuilding, and then there's how much raising, right? So can people move footprints? So lots may be completely demolished and none of the footprints are preserved. Do they need to preserve those footprints? And how does vertical expansion come into play? Maybe it's only interior renovation and site renovations only with small additions, allowed no more than 25%, or maybe 50%, depending on how much we want to mimic the definition of non-conforming structure, which relies on the 25%. And then the ordinance does allow 2 accessory structures. And so the question is, how do those play in? So when we talk about lot redevelopment, does that also include redevelopment of those accessory structures, some of which can be garages with ADUs over them or guest houses, so they can be fairly substantial accessory structures?
So one thing I think we should not have in here is interior changes. That's not something we regulate.
And I think my point in calling out interior changes was that it was looking at how big of a demo we wanted to allow. So if the demo was really, you had to keep the 4 walls of the structure and the foundation, and you really were only allowed to raise and rebuild the interior, you had to keep that footprint. That was my intent in calling out interior, not to regulate interior.
So the walls are really not important either. It's really the footprint.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Unless you start exceeding height, or it already exceeds height limitations.
Okay.
But it's really the footprint.
Okay.
I think we should get away from walls and interiors.
I agree.
So lot redevelopment, I think with that comment, we're leaning toward B. So raise and rebuild of existing occupied primary residential structures allowed in the existing footprint only.
What do you mean existing occupied? What's occupied?
Well, so I threw that in as a discussion point as well, because if the house has been single-family home, so it's a permitted use, so the use, you're not going to lose the use category, but it hasn't been occupied and it's falling down and dilapidated and it hasn't been used as a single-family home for 20 years, 10 years, whatever, 3 years. Are we still going to allow that footprint to be preserved as redevelopment and not necessarily called a new build, right? The house is falling in on itself. Is that redevelopment or is that a new build?
Well, there are houses in town that fall in on themselves with people in them. So,
I think you may have a perm application for one of your examples.
So I did throw that word occupied in so that we can have a discussion about it. We don't need to put that in there, though. We can, kind of make that a decision of staff.
well, I don't know, in the last years, it was whether or not they had been drawing like on water or sewer, with electricity, then they've been there.
Okay,
There's no evidence that somebody lived there, then it could be abandoned.
right. So that's the question, if we want to even include that in or not, if we're only talking about footprint.
Ordinance, abandoned buildings. That's a lot of different things, like a store that stops being a store, it's still a perfectly good store, but nobody used it. That's dangerous territory.
So usually the abandonment term is used in terms of classifying use. So there's, if you go back many years to the way variances used to be classified, there used to be use variances and then dimensional variances, right? For the most part, what we're looking at here and kind of arguing over are dimensional requirements. The use, we haven't even talked about. It is called out in this ordinance in the very first section, single-family home, accessory structures, boathouse. But this brings into question, we start talking about redevelopment, that use question kind of comes up, because if you're going to allow them to adopt the term redevelopment, meaning they get kind of special privileges, are we going to allow those privileges to a property where that single-family home is so dilapidated it has not been used as a single-family home? So that was my point in kind of bringing it into the discussion. It does sound like a lot of this discussion is revolving around the dimensional requirements, and that uses, we don't need necessarily to talk about use. If there's a structure, no matter what, how solid it is, if there's a foundation in a structure, we're going to preserve that and allow that to be grandfathered.
I think we have in the past used footprints. Yeah.
Yep, and that's fine. Yep, I just wanted to make sure it was discussed so that it wasn't something that we thought about after the fact, so.
I thought occupied had also come into use about porches and appendages of that nature when you were trying to decide what the footprint was. Does the footprint include closing in the porch? And the Shoreland Act has gone back and forth on these things for an extended period, including whether you can go up and whether you can't.
Yes, and a lot of that language is in the section of the ordinance 147, 175, 147. I've been working here long enough. I know these off the top of my head. This is great. About non-conforming structures. And that does talk about habitable area. And it does exclusively call out stairways and unroofed or unenclosed porches as not counting toward habitable area when you talk about non-conforming structures. So it is covered in that section.
And change of use is also covered somewhere else in the ordinance.
Very, very barely.
Yeah.
That is something that we probably do want to talk about at some other point in time, because it's one tiny little sentence in the entire ordinance, and it does leave a lot to interpretation.
But not our problem.
Yep, but we don't need to talk about it in the context of the shoreline ordinance. Yep. And so I think what I'm looking at is probably under lot redevelopment number B, so raise and rebuild of existing primary residential structures in the existing footprint. I did throw in the vertical expansion portion of this as well. So if somebody were to take a single-story cabin and build up to 3 stories, is that lot redevelopment or is that new build? Right, if they were to demo it wholly and build 3 stories high, or whatever the height requirement is.
So there's a different issue when it's in setbacks. Lately, in the last probably 15, 20 years, if it's a footprint, let's say it's a 1-story thing within the side setback, you can't go up 3 stories. You can't make it higher if it's in the setback, because that would be considered an encroachment on the neighbor.
Right.
And that's been around for a long time.
Right, and that is in the non-conforming structures section and would refer to a non-conforming structure that's in a setback. So, but again, let's talk about conforming structures, really, so just to simplify it here. So if somebody that meets all their setbacks but has a single-story structure wants to build up to the very height requirement, are we considering that a new build, or is that lot redevelopment if they're on the same foundation?
It's not a new build.
Yeah.
Lot redevelopment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that where it says, but vertical expansion is allowed, I know there's another place where the height restrictions are listed, but I think that's scary to me, to just leave it open, so maybe put something up to the,
Yes,
you know.
to the allowed height
Right,
restriction.
yeah.
Yep.
Yep, let's
Yes.
not leave
Yep,
that
we can do
open.
that. Okay. And so the other question is, and this is kind of what is in A, is if they have a 30 by 30 foundation, they're going to raise the entire structure. They're going to put in a 30 by 30 foundation, but they're going to move it 15 feet in one direction or another. Are we good with that? Or does it need to stay in the exact footprint for it to be a rebuild? Or
The only time it
redevelopment.
really needs to stay in the footprint is when it's in the setback.
okay.
I agree.
I
Yep.
agree.
Otherwise, you
Yeah.
can do what you want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up to the usual height and building code standards.
Great. So that helps us define lot redevelopment, which we then, okay, I'm
I
sorry.
have one more. So you wrote in
Oh, sorry.
B, which we seem to be favoring, right? That it's only the primary residential structure.
Right.
What about the garage and
The accessory
shed?
structures.
Yeah.
Yep. So again, is our when a person raises and rebuilds, and let me think how this would be applicable to the shoreland, under lot redevelopment. So if they are raising and rebuilding the garage, are they subject, and it's not the primary structure, it's one of the accessory structures, are they subject to any of the requirements previously in this ordinance, or are we also going to exempt them like we're exempting other lot redevelopment? I'm thinking we're exempting them. If we're exempting the primary structure, it sounds like you guys want to exempt also the
You
accessory
can only
structures.
have the 2 accessory structures as usual.
Correct. Yep.
You know, the usual rules apply.
Yep. Okay.
What about if you're moving all these things around, which I'm not sure is a good idea, unless it's to get them out of the setback? What about the impact on impervious surfaces and might have, or cutting down more of the vegetation? That seems to kind of defeat part of the purpose.
So if there's a reduction in impervious coverage, it's exempt.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're increasing the impervious coverage over 20%, then other criteria kick in, but you can't go to 30. That's my understanding.
Yep. That is 100%. Yep. So we're good? So to move on from the definition under lot redevelopment, the way that this previously read, we didn't define it, so now we are, and now that it's defined, we know that it's going to be exempt from where we exempted it earlier. But the existing language said, okay, if you're lot redevelopment, you need to submit all of this additional material above and beyond if you're not lot redevelopment, which didn't make sense to me. So you had to submit footprints, impervious areas, location of all structures, profiles of all existing and proposed structures within the water body buffer, showing ridgeline heights to scale and dimensions. All of that is required anyway. Why it was called out specific to lot redevelopment, I don't know, and it seemed as if it was putting an extra burden on lot redevelopment and not
I
new
think
structures.
that's only if you have structures in setbacks.
So non-conforming structures.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is part of, again, that other section of the ordinance that talks about non-conforming structures, and so isn't necessarily applicable here specifically to the shoreland section of the ordinance. So I think
General, yeah.
to take that burden off of redevelopment, or to make it appear as if it is assigned only to redevelopment, makes sense just to remove it.
But if you're relocating buildings within, well, as long as we keep it to pre-existing primary structures, but if we start moving around buildings, then we need to know what the impervious area is, where the footprint is. We need to know where the footprint is anyway. So you don't suddenly find that the footprint suddenly got a little larger and moved. And you need to know about any wetlands. You need to know about where they're going to have impervious surfaces, so we know whether it triggers any of the other requirements.
But you have to do that every time anyway.
Right, whether it's redevelopment or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly, yep. So the way that it was called out only under redevelopment was very confusing to applicants. I do think, though, on page 8, you see at the top of the page, there's a lot of red line, the first black paragraph. It did ask for a narrative letter explaining how the project was more nearly conforming with the existing structures. I think that is helpful, so that we get it in the words of the applicant, how they're changing the lot, how they're coming into conformance with the ordinance.
And that's true with the state, too. They like to see you move it back from the lake, even if you can't move it all the way back. So
Right.
it's usually how it's more nearly conforming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the other red line, where we changed stormwater management to stormwater control measures, that was just making it consistent with wording earlier in the ordinance, where we talked about stormwater control measures in the impervious area, section A. So I just made that language consistent. So those are my recommended changes. I did take a lot of notes regarding the language that you were giving me today. And I think what I'd like to do is provide a final version of this to you guys. And then once you give me the thumbs up, then I can amend the application to mimic the wording of this ordinance, so that it's very clear to the applicant exactly how to move forward.
Do we want to send this by the Wolfeboro Waters Committee, since they were the entity that brought it to us?
They're aware.
Okay.
But we haven't necessarily committed to doing this, let's say, putting it on our agenda to promote next year, but if this is for understanding,
Correct.
yeah, it's a work product so that you can write the application.
Correct.
And then we can keep this in the back burner, but I think immediately changing something we just changed, probably not good.
Right.
Would we like to give Randy an opportunity to provide some feedback?
I certainly would. So, Randy, would you like to speak?
Okay, is it on?
There we go.
Okay, just a quick clarification on B, Shanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just a quick clarification on B. The impervious calculation is always drawn from 0 to 250. So anytime you figure the impervious amount, that the 20% or whatever percent it is, it's from 0 to 250. It's the whole.
Correct.
It's the whole zone, not
Yep.
not 150.
And where are you seeing 150?
If you look in B,
It says
What
within
page?
150.
What page?
page 4, the one you guys were just talking about, where it says the unaltered buffer. It's a natural woodlands buffer, construction of lots where the impervious coverage is increasing within 150 feet. It's really 0 to 250. The impervious calculation is done from 0 to 250 on every lot, unless it isn't 250 feet, unless it's less than 250 feet, the lot itself. But, so that's where you get your percentages. So that should say 250. And then
I'm sorry, Randy, I'm still lost. What-
Okay.
If you look at B, where we were talking
Yep.
about earlier, the second line
Yep.
reads within 150 feet from the reference line.
Yeah, see, the only 150 from the reference line is when you 0 to 150 is how you figure a big lot or a small lot. The percentage coverage is always 0 to 250.
So this section B doesn't talk about impervious coverage. This section B talks about the natural woodlands buffer.
Right, and the natural woodlands buffer is between 50 and 150.
Correct. which is
Okay,
what-
it's not, 150 has nothing to do with it, okay? And it does talk about impervious because that's how you figure whether you need to apply the woodlands buffer or not, right? It's the percentage. If you're over,
But not the percentage of impervious, the percentage of the gross area. So if you look at 1, at least 50% of the area between 50 and 150, not 50% of the impervious.
And that's all out of the current ordinance.
yeah, but see, when you figure the unaltered area, you don't count the first 50 feet. You only count between 50 and 150.
Right, that's what it says, at least 50% of the area between 50 feet and 150 feet from the reference line.
That's in B1.
Yeah, and then
Right.
2 as well, so 25% of the area between 50 feet and 150 feet from the reference line.
Yeah, up top, it says only new construction and lots
Yeah,
where impervious is
yep.
increasing to 150.
Yeah, I agree, that should also read 50 to 150.
Yes, thank you.
Not the 250, yes.
Right, no,
Yep.
I was just generally saying that's
Yep.
how the percentage
Yep,
is.
I got that,
Yeah,
yep.
okay.
Thank you, yep.
And I think there's another spot where it says it too. I highlighted it, I had it. There was another spot where it says it the same way, Shauna.
If
I
you
think
can
it-
email it to me, then I can,
Yeah, yeah.
I can take a look at
And
that.
so, and those were the only two things. As far as my comment to whether it was just a non-conforming structure with the reconstruction, it was any structure that was being reconstructed, even if it wasn't non-conforming. But as far as the area staying the same, as far as the volume and so forth and the ridge line, if it was in the setback, then it was always, you couldn't get any bigger as far as the volume was. But if you got past that, you could. There's also been instances that you brought up where, and we just had one not that long ago, where there was an old camp that was falling in. I don't know how many years since it'd been used, and that fell under what we fell under for reconstruction, you know, because it was still there and it was going to be demoed. We didn't really get into the inhabiting part of that, but so that does happen occasionally. But they were all viewed, whether you guys decide to change it or not, they were viewed that if there was something on there, you know, they were redeveloping it. So I'm glad a lot of this stuff is getting clarified. It'll be helpful down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep.
All right, are we all good on shorefront?
All right, thank you so much for going through that with me. I really appreciate it, and I will get you another draft for your next meeting.
All right, Shannon, thanks for your work on that.
Yeah.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a review of the Capital Improvements Program Committee Rules of Procedure. I believe, Leanne, were you involved in doing this, putting this together for us? Is that right? Thank you.
So this was the result of, basically a result of the, sorry. Or not. So we needed to update the rules of procedure because the membership of the CIP, the voting members said that 2 of the members of the planning board, 1 of the members would be the chairperson of that board. And your inability to be on the CIP.
Yes, it's being changed
Right.
for my benefit, thank you.
Well, in the benefit of anybody in the future. So, and then as I was reviewing it, I noticed some other changes that should take place. So as we go through the document, it's a very short document, so it won't take long. The first change is in the title itself, where it didn't even include the word program, which was
Proofread.
yeah. So I included the word program in the title. Then we go down to membership, and we strike 1 to be the chairperson of the board, and just include 2 members of the planning board. Recently, the Board of Selectmen changed their calling, how do I say that?
They changed
They
the name
don't-
of their board
Right,
from...
Their pronoun.
Select board, right. So I changed, while we're changing the rules of procedure, I just decided we would change it from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. So that's also a proposed change. Then in the next paragraph, I propose that we actually put the correct name of our department, which is Planning and Development Department. And then instead of using an acronym, I actually spelt out the regional school district. Then we go down to officers, and I struck the reference to the chairperson of the planning board and just put in planning board member.
And I guess we should somehow establish how we will decide who will be chair of the committee.
The chairperson of the capital improvements.
Doesn't it have to be someone from the planning board?
It does, but there are going to be 2 members from the planning board, and so we have to decide,
Don't we choose?
well, not according to this.
Oh,
Do
So
we
if-
choose, or does the CIP committee choose?
Traditionally, the chair of the planning board has chaired the
Just move
CIP.
over.
So now if the chairperson of the planning board will not be there, then I think there needs to be a vote amongst the planning board to decide who will be the chair of the CIP.
I think that's fair.
Yep.
That way, when
Yep.
their first meeting's on, it's not a surprise.
Any thoughts from anybody else on that?
So we know it'll be a planning board member, but we just need to actually state that it'll be designated by the,
Yes.
okay, so do you want to give me the language?
Yeah, I guess, I don't see why we would be designating the chair of a committee that the planning board has 2 members on, but is not a planning board committee. I don't know why the CIP committee wouldn't decide who they want to be the chair.
It is a planning board committee.
Well, yeah, but it's not the board, it's a committee composed of 2 members of the planning board and a whole bunch of other people.
Well, my understanding is that the Capital Improvements Program Committee is a subcommittee of the planning board.
Correct, because I've asked about
Right
that
up.
before.
Right, and it seems like the easy way to do it is for the planning board to simply indicate which member they want to be chairman.
So just as designated by the board.
Right.
First
that's it.
paragraph. First paragraph. Authority.
We just have to make the designation sometime before the first meeting.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's right. So I would propose it read, the chairperson of the Capital Improvements Program Committee shall be a planning board member designated by the planning board.
Board. Right.
Could you say one of the 2 planning board members?
Well, yeah,
It
right,
says a
Keep it up?
planning board
Okay.
member designated by the planning board.
right.
Okay.
Do we want to designate somebody now since we're doing it?
Did- I believe you,
We got months to go.
I thought you already you already appointed Steve and Kathy
Yes, that's right.
as the
Yeah, well,
members.
I mean, I think Steve should be the chairman.
Thanks, Kathy.
Are you going to vote?
Yeah, I'll second that.
I guess we're voting now?
All in
Okay,
favor?
so Kathy has nominated Steve Webster as chair of the Capital Improvements Program Committee. Roger has seconded that nomination.
He's an alternate.
Oh, that's true. Kathy's an alternate.
He can't.
Yeah.
He hasn't
Well,
been
somebody else
appointed.
make the motion.
Somebody else make the motion then.
Roger, would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we designate Steve as chair of the CIP committee,
Sorry.
And I'll second that.
because I know he'll do a spectacular job.
Steve, will you accept that
I'll
nomination?
abstain, I'll accept it, yes.
You'll accept the nomination. All in favor of Steve Webster as chair of the CIP for this year?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all settled. Good.
Made my night.
Okay. Let's see, and then I added, of course, the page numbers and footnote, and that is it.
All right. So I move to accept the changes as proposed by this draft of the rules of procedure.
Note the date on the very back of the page, Leanne, it is adopted July 24th. Can we do an amendment on that line as well?
So the amended date should have,
I will add the amended date.
Just want to make sure it was in there.
Yep.
yeah. So would anybody like to second that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. And presumably, Leanne, this does not require 2 hearings, is that right? Okay.
No, it does not.
All right. The next order of business is rules of procedure for the planning board.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so we, oh. So this was put on our work program to incorporate a procedure regarding the minutes, and ensuring that the minutes are changed after they've been approved, and the previous minutes actually revised to reflect the corrections at a following meeting. So again, as I went through, I changed Board of Selectmen to Select Board and just took the time to review any type of grammatical changes, proofing changes.
So Leanne, under members where you've changed number 2 to read the select board, following that, I would also change, shall designate one member of the select board rather than selectmen.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Thank you.
And then if we want to be really inclusive, then under officers number 1, it could read at the end, rather than he, she, it could read they, if you want to be really politically correct.
Oh, that'll probably be throughout the entire document then, right? Because there's a lot of herself, himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll correct all of those.
Well, just, make it today's language. It just, thanks for catching all these other ones. Because, we're not all going to fit in the meeting room downstairs, so it's a good catch,
Okay.
In the 3rd line of the section under meetings, I think it could read at least 24 hours prior to such meeting, because you already addressed notice before that. Shall be provided public notice, and notice to each member is given at least 24 hours prior to such meeting.
So the word notice after 24 hours.
Yep.
Add an S after hour and cross out notice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Do we need to read this? Don't we?
I think Roger's point is that if this is the first public hearing, then we need to go through the whole thing.
It doesn't have to be a public hearing, it's just technically a reading to go through the change, just read
Okay.
through the changes, which is similar to what I
Yeah,
just.
the amendment needs to be read at the meeting. So.
And, yeah, and then also on page, they didn't show up for some reason, by the way, Roger, but I did add page numbers. So I know, don't worry, they will be added to the final document. So as far as the reading goes, so we'll make changes to members, number 2, and then officers, number 3, and number 1, and then throughout the document, him, herself, himself, he, she, and then meetings number 1, and then I'm not so sure, number 5, page 2, number 5, order of business. I'm not so sure if you want to take a look at that. I'm not sure if you want all of those, unfinished business, new business, or if you just want to do other business. It just seems like we have a lot of.
And just reading into the record here, you've changed minutes of previous meeting to consideration of minutes, which I think is fine.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. I skipped ahead.
That's all right.
And,
We've got a lot of business.
yeah, lots of business.
So I
It just-
agree that E, F, and G, which is currently communications and miscellaneous,
Right.
unfinished business, and new business, could all be under other business for to make it
Just,
simple.
yeah, simplify it somehow. And then we also, we have like work sessions and I'm not sure how you want to do that. Sometimes now we have an agenda item called work session or work program or discussion items, and that's not in here. So I don't know if you want to maybe,
Well, so under meetings number 1, it only speaks to the first Tuesday of the month. It doesn't address any subsequent meetings. And then it reads that other meetings may be held on the call of the chair, which we regularly do on the third Tuesday. I don't know that we need to get any more defined than that.
Well, in the order of business, it says, shall generally be as follows.
Yes.
So that just kind of means that, we do the introduction first.
okay. So the work programs, we can pretty much
Plug
make
them in
our
there
own
where they need to
agenda.
go.
Yeah, and you got
Okay.
a footnote to cover that, too.
Okay. So then we go down to applications and decisions, and in A, deleted made on forms provided by, and changed to filed with the Planning and Development Office. And then deleted and shall be submitted to staff not less than 20 days prior to the scheduled meeting date. The RSA actually changed to 21 days. So rather than putting a number specific, for days, because the RSA could change again, I simply put in accordance with
Good change.
RSA 674 submission requirements. And that way we never have to go back and continuously change the number of days. And then we skip down to B, and I just put in Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance instead of the zoning ordinance. Then we go to the next page. Underneath public meeting and hearing, I just.
No,
simply-
hold on.
What? Did I
Under
skip?
under
Oh,
applications
A.
number 2, public notice.
Yep.
You've added location to,
Instead of place.
yeah.
It's just, right, time and, instead of time and place, it's time and location.
Yeah.
And then under 3, what did I do? Oh, the conduct of, I deleted something. Public hearing, the conduct of a public, I deleted, okay, so it read the conduct of a public meeting and hearing on an application shall be governed by the following rules, but sometimes you continue public hearings. So I just deleted A and then put it as a potential plural. And then I skipped down to the next one, 3A, the chair shall call the public meeting/hearing in session. And it was also the chairman, so I got rid of man and just put chair. And then we skipped down to 3D, and that was an addition, and I put, if applicable, the planning board shall act on any requested waivers from site plan regulations or subdivision regulations. There was nothing in that section that addressed waivers. It just.
Do we want to limit it to site plan and subdivision? Perhaps we could just say requested waivers from regulations, so it would be all-encompassing.
It could be any of them.
They're the only things we
the only
can
thing yeah.
grant waivers to.
Okay.
You can't grant a waiver to the zoning ordinance. You can only grant waivers to site plan and subdivision regulations.
Okay.
Yep. And then we skip down to F. Again, I deleted man from chairman, so it just reads the chair, and then shall open the public hearing. It said shall call the public hearing. I struck call and replaced it with open. And then,
Down to L.
I'm trying to find, down to L. Place, again, I think, it was again, I replaced place with time and location, because you have to continue a public hearing to a date, time, and location. And then down to M, again, everywhere in the document where it said chairman, I struck it, or vice chairman, I struck to only do chair and vice chair. And then reopen the public hearing. I think it only said hearing, reopen the hearing.
So you've added public.
I added public. And then, and then I just capitalized notice. Okay.
Now we get to the important part, at records 2.
What? Oh, the records. Records, yes. Then the next page, we go down to records number 2, which is the reason why we did this. I added the following paragraph, which was following the approval of draft minutes, the minutes shall be revised to reflect the amendments voted by the board and shall be reflected as approved minutes.
Should it be reflected as or recorded as?
Well, they're recorded by statute, they're recorded, but the minutes themselves should be reflected
Reflect the changes.
Okay.
as approved on the top. And then joint meetings, 1, looks like I deleted a comma after. It was just a not grammatical proofing. Again, I deleted the man after chair. And I think, oh, and then the next page, 3, correspondence. This whole address was very backwards, so I just put it where
Reconfigured
it
it?
should be.
Fixed it?
Reconfigured it, yes. And I believe that is it.
Thank you. And of course, you'll put a new adoption date should these be approved.
Yes. New adoption date. Now, this, according to the rules of procedure, we read it, and now you need to adopt it at the next meeting. We can't adopt it at this meeting.
So we will have a public notice that there will be a second reading?
No, we just
No?
put it on the next agenda, and
Okay.
you adopt it at the next agenda.
Okay.
That was a question I had. Can I just ask a random question? Can I just ask a random question that dawned on me the other night?
Of course.
About when you just said advertised?
Oh, we'll get into that in a minute.
Okay, so I did send you an
I know
email
what you're
then.
talking about,
Okay,
yes.
I couldn't remember if I did or not.
Yeah,
Never mind.
yeah. So that's all we need to do as far as rules of procedure is concerned, is that right?
Yeah.
All right. So just quickly to address what Julie brought up, she brought to my attention that the line item in the budget for planning board notices has been zeroed out.
For notices?
The budget
was
for
called
publishing
advertising.
public notices, the advertising budget for planning board has been zeroed out.
By the new select board
Yes.
at their budget meeting. Isn't that where our cash comes from to pay the paper to put the notices in? That was just a thought that ran through my head,
I will look into.
because that's kind of a
I've
legal
al-
notices.
Leanne, I sent an email to Jim Pinio asking that question and copied you on the email.
Okay. I can see it.
That was 2 days ago.
Now, I'll ask a member of the board for input.
So certainly the advertising for applicants is paid for by the applicant. But if we want to put a public notice in for warrant articles, then that would be paid for by the planning board.
Well, not only that, but just notices for meetings. Because, I mean, I read the paper yesterday, and there was like no meeting notices. And I don't think there was in the week before either.
Well, I don't think it's necessary to publish a meeting notice if there's no public hearing.
But there was, Atwell.
But that's a continuance, it doesn't need a new notice.
We haven't heard it before,
Yes,
have
we
we?
have. It was
Did we? It
continued
was
from
continued?
before. We heard it.
Okay.
Yes.
We've seen it several times, so I get confused.
That's right, but only if there's a new hearing does it need to be posted in the paper.
And that's why it was missing.
Atwell was in the newspaper.
Was it?
Yeah,
I missed it then.
typically there's one notice a month for planning board.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess I just missed it.
And the current fees, does the current fee structure, doesn't cover it, does it?
Yes,
It does. Okay.
It does.
All right, the next item on the agenda is review of the short-term rental application.
Okay, can you pass this? And then pass it.
Leanne, do you want to walk us through this? You've done, I think, a very good job at putting this together, so thank you.
Yeah, she really did an exceptional job of putting this together.
You said the application?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just passing, going around, is the short-term rental ordinance. I should have included that in your packet, so I apologize. The reason why I'm passing it out is because basically what you see on the application is what came from the ordinance, okay? So some of the requests, or I don't know how you want to say it, but some of the asks on the application, some of the asks on the checklist is derived from the ordinance, so that you make sure that you
Yeah, they
get
should match.
everything and we don't miss something. So basically, you're just looking at the short-term rental conditional use permit application. So real quick, nuts and bolts, you've got tax map and lot number, the property address right at the top, the application and public notice fees right there, can't miss it. And then you have all the, emails, phone numbers of the legal mailing address of the property owner, authorized agent in case they're being represented by a person in front of the board. And then, of course, the board, per the ordinance, asked also for a property manager or emergency contact while the property is being rented. So that's all right up front. And then, trying to mirror the ordinance, we requested, or on the application, the request for New Hampshire rooms and meals tax license number. Some people who go through, some renters who go through like Airbnb or VRBO. In fact, I had one person come in today. They're like, I don't know, do I have one? And they're like, I just have Airbnb do everything. So they may not know their New Hampshire meals and room tax number, but they have one because Airbnb puts it all in a nice package and sends all their stuff too. So that's why I put that down, because they have their STR agency listing and ID number, but they may not know what their New Hampshire meals tax. So trying to give them a little latitude.
Well, yeah, but it's a good idea to have both of those numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, again, to mirror the ordinance, we want to know the number of on-site parking spaces. So even though they're going to provide a site plan, it's also nice to just see the numbers right up front. So right on this application, we're going to see right away when you have this in front of you. Yes, you're going to have a site plan, but right in front of you, you're going to see number of bedrooms of the subject property, number of on-site parking, maximum occupancy, and I put the formula right there, and put it right bold, on-street parking is prohibited. And then, also told them how the number of bedrooms shall be determined, which is also in the ordinance. And then you flip it over and put it in different color as far as the writing, so it pops a little more with regard to that sewer, because this is where some people might get a little bit like not sure, like, wait a minute, what am I, because not everybody understands what their disposal operation approval is, or what the number is, and that's okay. But that's why I wanted it to pop for them. And that way they can ask those questions, like, what does this mean? What do I need? And that's all they do. And then as you start to read through, it basically, they sign this, and it gives the code officer, the fire department, and the planning board permission for the site visit, because the conditional use permit, the conditional use permit ordinance requires the site visit. So this way, right up front, they're giving permission. And they're giving permission for the fire department and the code enforcement officer to perform the inspections. So we don't have to have a separate piece of paper for those two departments. So just trying to combine and simplify. So that, in a nutshell, is the application. And then,
Just on the application, the selectmen are going to have to adopt the $300 fee. Is that correct?
yes, so the select board,
Yeah, yeah.
yep. The
There's my wife's
select
motion on
board
it.
adopts the fees, the fee structure. Yes. So,
Can we have more space at the bottom on the back for signatures? Because they're never going to hit that line. It's too short.
oh yeah, I can extend it.
Mess it around, and maybe have 2 owner signature lines, because there may be a
Yeah, I actually
double.
did have 2 signature lines, and then,
Yep.
so I can add 2 signature lines and 1 agent line, because there is enough room.
Yep.
Yep, I
But
can
I've
do
seen an
that.
awful lot of signatures that are very, very large, then you can't read it.
Yep, I can definitely do that. So I will, wait a minute.
And then on the noise ordinance, that should be chapter 100-5.
Okay, hold on.
Where are you at, Roger?
I'm on the last full line. Or second to last full.
Oh, 100?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then it's chapter 112, article 3 on the trash.
I have that, 112 Article 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a section. I would use chapter because that's what it is officially.
Oh, instead of,
Instead of the
Wait.
symbol that you have which represents
Oh.
section, it should read chapter.
Yeah.
so chapter, and then leave the word article, though?
Yep.
Okay, so,
That's the way it's designated.
okay, so just get rid of the little symbol.
Yep.
And then the noise ordinance,
Is chapter 100-5,
okay, so get rid of
which
chapter,
is the additional restrictions.
okay. Okay, any other changes?
So I see you've got the DES subsurface sewage disposal system approval number, but do we have any kind of tax map, or what if you're on town sewer? How many
Where?
bedrooms do you have, and where do you find it
So over here, on the back side,
of this?
yeah, where
Yeah,
are you?
I'm
Wait a
just
minute.
looking at this checklist.
Oh, so you're on the checklist, okay, so now, New Hampshire Department of, okay, so, yep, so that's probably where I should write a note. If on town, all right, hold on. Does not, okay, so we haven't gotten there yet, but, so what Vaughn has now moved on to the application requirements checklist, and she went down towards the bottom, the 1, 2, 3, the 4th one up, the New Hampshire DES subsurface, and she's basically saying if you're on town sewer, because that won't apply. So what I'm going to do is add a note, basically if you're on municipal sewer, that won't, that won't apply. So I'll add a note.
So would that be
Right.
found on the tax card, what
What?
their bedroom count is for the sewer?
Yes.
So you look on the tax card, and if you have 3 bedrooms, that's what you have. Yeah.
Because that's what you taxed for.
So what I'll do, so I guess what I'll need to do is, see, this is kind of where I'll have to put that note, see, on the short-term rental application.
Yeah.
I will put this note about number of bedrooms shall be determined, which is in the ordinance. I will mirror that note on the checklist.
Yep.
So there's a lot of duplication, but at least it's the same.
Yep.
And that's what you kind of want to do so that they're not having to search everywhere.
Right.
So just, I will duplicate the language, which I did try to do on several, but
But it does say the number of bedrooms is determined based on,
that's on the application, but not on the checklist, Roger.
all right.
Right, so if they go to the checklist,
You got to do both.
right, you just need to do everything uniform so that, and that is the checklist. Like, that's what they're checking off to make sure that they have. And that's required at the top. I say it's required as part of the application, so.
So on the application checklist, I don't see water, well or water. You just have sewage disposal. Whereas on the other one, you say water or sewer.
Because all I want to know on the application is whether they're on it or not.
Right.
We just want to track it.
Don't you want to?
They're not providing any other information.
Don't want to have it mirrored?
No.
Because I could see people just doing this one first.
No, so this checklist
Yeah.
is checking off, basically, this checklist is a checklist that you actually have to find information and provide. You have to submit.
It's a checklist of physical things that you need to have.
Physical things you have to
Okay.
go
I
get
could
and
just
submit.
see people starting over here on this one and doing the checklist first before they did the application. And
Right.
I'm saying, would it be too hard to put another couple of boxes under there so they can just fill the blank box? Yep, got a well. Nope, on sewer.
But we don't
you know.
care how,
But we're not
Does it make-
asking the question. This is a checklist of whether or not you've submitted. It's
Okay, okay, I get what you're saying. I just, see the public all the time and I'll see like the wrong piece of paper.
So maybe what I'll put is application submittal requirements checklist, so that it's part of the submittal.
Yeah,
These are
that's good.
physical
You need all of the
submittals.
pages, yes.
Yeah.
All 22 that you got sent, we need them all back. Yeah,
Because they're not submitting anything with regard to water. It's more of a tracking thing
yes.
with the water.
Why do you need 15 plan sets?
So that we're not making all the copies for the board. We have 10 board, or 7, 8, 9, 10 board members.
Okay.
So that's for the conditional use permit.
Yep. And we'll be changing that in all of our applications. 1 for staff, 2 for staff, board, 1 for the file. A lot of ink, takes time, staff time.
You're still only requesting like 1 full size though, right? 2 full size?
What did I ask for?
I'm not seeing it, I just see 15, 11, 17s.
Oh, for this, just 15. 1 for the file, and then this, we're not asking for the big sets.
Okay.
We're just asking 1 for the file.
It's burdensome, I see it, it's
Yeah,
burdensome.
Nope, not for the short-term
Good for my wallet,
rental.
but it's burdensome.
Yep, nope, not for the short-term rental. Only for like subdivision and not trying to put a hardship.
Now, when you're at the bottom here, you're asking with the checklist for the identification number, STR agency number, are you asking them to write it on this page?
No,
It goes on the
Do you
application.
want a copy of the form?
No, they need to know the number so that it can be included on the application.
But it doesn't say that.
that's why I just wrote
Okay.
myself a note. I'm gonna make it clear up here that this is a checklist to go through, review, and check off that you've completed it, and you
But you
have
could
all
just
the forms
add the words.
associated.
It's a on application.
Yep. Yeah.
I've seen other towns, things come through at work, and I've gotten smarter as I've been doing this, and I'll say, well, where's your checklist? You know, when they're trying to figure out how many copies of stuff they know. Not every town sends a checklist, or one that's even, you know, semi-legible. You know, they just kind of like send people with 20 pieces of paper and expect them to figure it out. Sometimes it's a little tough. I think it's better all the way around if we can make it so that it's a simple procedure, so that we don't have crying and hair pulling at the end.
That's why you're reviewing this for me. Yeah, and if you think of anything else, just feel free to email me. And then the last form is I put together some instructions for this application.
That's good.
And just also some general information. So that kind of expands on, for instance, the fees, what the fees actually go for. The application, it breaks down. So the application is $300. The public hearing notice is the $150. The abutter notification certified mailing, it's a separate, they take care of it, and this is what you do. And then the recording fee, it's to be determined, and we don't have anything to do with it, Carroll County Registry of Deeds, so that they understand that those are how it is. And then I made it clear that the fees are due upon, due upon submission, they're non-refundable, so that it's made very clear. And then the submission requirements for the conditional use permit, and again, that's all of the completed application, so they get that 3 times, so hopefully, or a couple of times. And then down below, signatures, make it clear what signatures are required, the checklist, the abutters, the abutters, the RSA recently changed last August. So I added that, I added the RSA, and the notice of decision, what?
I think we should make a choice on whether it's going to be no more than or within 5 days instead of having than within.
What? Where?
Second line down under abutters.
Obtain no more than, oh, yeah, oops. Obtained,
Extra.
no, within, right? Within.
Submit accurate abutter information within 5 days.
Within, yeah, within. Sorry, good catch, Roger.
Does it make sense to read within 5 days prior to the submittal date?
Wait a minute, I'll just look at the RSA. It has to mirror the RSA.
Yeah, I looked at it quickly and I couldn't find it in there. I know I've seen it someplace.
Oh,
Must be obtained at least 5 days prior, I would think.
I think it's within.
No, it has to be closer than 5. You can't do it 6 days.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah,
Obtained within 5 days of the submittal date.
within.
Yeah.
Not take out the word prior, just within 5 days of the submittal date. Or if you want to keep this wording, obtain no more than 5 days prior to the submittal date. Take out within. Yeah, that's, I think, Roger, I think what you said originally. Just take out the word within.
You know, I like within.
Do you want me to just search? I can find it within the RSA, and I'll just
Yeah, that's
mirror
fine.
the image.
Make it match.
Yeah. Mirror RSA. Okay, I'll find it.
I think you'll probably find, little glitches and things when you copy off a couple and start faking it, fill it out, or hand it to somebody else and ask them to fill it out. And then they'll go, where's the,
Yeah, there is language in the RSA. I'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then I go on to the notice of decision so that people understand what actually happens after the meeting, because a lot of people will be like, okay, now what? So I
Because
thought
it doesn't say anywhere.
Right.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
Right, so I thought I'd just add what happens following a determination of the board. And then there's that one extra step, which is in our ordinance, we talk about, after the, an approval, the fire department and the code enforcement officer then go out for an inspection. And so then a certificate of compliance is issued.
I think it should say either a new or the new, I would say a new certificate, because they've already had one which is expiring, so they're getting a new one.
The last sentence?
Yeah.
A new, or a renewed, or a new?
Well, I think we're saying they're getting a new certificate is the name of it.
No, I was just going to say, maybe we should just keep it really, really simple and say applicant's responsibility to submit accurate abutter information 5 days prior to the submittal date. Because all the other words, it's confusing.
No, I think we want to be consistent, and if Leanne can get the New Hampshire RSA, the official language from the RSA, that's better than us coming up with something new.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you doing any kind of notice to the public on when this is going to be ready and get it out there so that the current renters will know what's up?
I haven't done any notice because I didn't know what kind of timeline we were on with the board. And so I didn't know how this was going to be received by the board, these documents. But it sounds like you guys are, yep.
Oh, okay,
That's
but
pretty
the
close.
next step is to have the fees approved by the Board of Selectmen,
Yes. So,
right?
well,
And
yeah,
then that would kind of make it official, right, when it's a
Yeah,
fee structure?
right.
So maybe the board of select persons will, select board
Yeah, we
will
have-
notify the public on when this is happening.
well, there's a couple.
No, I think it's up to us to do that.
No, it's the planning board.
Okay.
It's definitely the planning board. It's, yeah. There's a couple of next steps. So now we can present the fee structure to the board of, the select board. I've also started, behind the scenes, it's unpublished, but I've also started a web page already, designing that for the short-term rentals so that that'll be ready to just click publish, and that'll be ready to go when we're ready. I already.
Is this just a link in the other website?
It'll
Or
be
is it
right
a
on the
whole new
planning board.
website?
No, it's right on the planning board page.
Just a page, okay, not a
Yeah.
new
It's,
website.
yeah, it's a page within the planning board's.
Yeah, I heard her say a
Pages.
new website, and I went, wait, oh,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So on the planning board page, it'll just be a link on the left-hand
Yeah,
side. It'll
okay.
say short-term rentals, and you just click on it.
Yeah, new
and
tab, yeah.
It'll have its own page.
yeah.
Yep. So that's already in process. And what else? So the fees, that, and I now just have to develop a certificate of compliance and an inspection checklist for the fire department and the code enforcement officer. But
Maybe we should ask the fire department what they want on their checklist.
we have a small subcommittee that the chief and the building inspector is on, Kathy, Shanna, Doug, Steve, right? No? Oh, okay.
I
maybe.
just interrupt.
I don't know.
In
Anyways.
any case, the STR subcommittee met with the fire chief, among others, to make sure that we were doing everything that he thought needed to be done. So he will have some form to work from to make sure that it's complying with the ordinance.
I think he'd have the last word on that, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Well, the certificate of compliance was actually the building official and the fire department's, fire chief's suggestion, so, yep. So I can get that up and running in a week. But we have people that are ready to apply for.
Well, spring's here, you know.
Yep, so,
Okay,
you've
so
been working hard.
have you talked to Casey about the fees, and is she going to take it to the Board of Select Board?
I need to talk to her now tomorrow,
Okay.
but she is aware. She is aware that this was coming, yes.
Okay, so are we sort of
She's
shooting
just
for
waiting on me.
the middle of May, it seems?
Well, is that fee acceptable?
I assume that it's acceptable to us. I don't know how we would set it otherwise. I think it's in part up to the select board to determine what the costs are to implement these regulations and set the fee accordingly.
Oh,
Certainly, they have the ultimate authority to decide what the fees will be.
Okay. All right.
They've been talking a lot about fees lately, so this should be right up their alley.
Okay. All right. Well, I will meet with Casey tomorrow and discuss with her when we can get on the Board of Selectmen's agenda.
Thank you.
okay, but can we add that we're trying to get this out to the public by mid-April, or May, so that, it moves along?
Add to
Just
who?
a suggestion.
Add to who?
What, do you want me to add that to who? To Casey or to the board?
Yeah,
What do you want me to add?
I think, we need to get going on this.
I think Kathy's point is to make sure the select board is aware that we'd like to have this live by mid-May.
Yes.
It is an ordinance.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's already
in
an ordinance, but we
right,
just need to be
but-
able to
It's in
to run it.
effect right now.
And you said there's applicants waiting.
We will,
Yeah.
I will expedite it. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Good job.
Anything else? So, Leanne, thank you again for all your efforts on this. I know you put a lot
Yeah.
of hours into it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Many, good job.
Other business. I got a suggestion in the past week from Julie on updating the Wolfeboro Falls zone to show actual use. Julie, would you like to explain your intent?
Yeah, quite a few years ago, we had a change in how this all comes because I watched a zoning board meeting. Quite a few years ago, the Wolfeboro Falls district, all the districts were a little bit different. It used to be like 100 feet from the center of the street all the way up, and then we all voted on stuff and we all changed it to go the entire lot instead of just 100 feet of the first lot. This is quite a few years ago. So part of the problem in a couple of sections, and it's not just at the end of the Wolfeboro Falls district, was that when we changed that, within the 100 feet, sometimes it took in a back lot that was on another street. So those continued to stay business. It was business up here. Oh, that one is too because the 100 feet goes all that way. Well, when we said only to the lots that were on the street, that cut off these guys over here, which was fine as long as they continued their business as it was going. But then when it came time to sell a business, sell a building, that sort of thing, some people have had some problems. So the way that at the end of the Wolfeboro Falls district ends, it ends at 109A, 28109A, right there at the corner. It ends. But the bay really does go down a little bit farther, and the businesses do go down a little bit farther onto Elm Street. So my proposal is when we're doing all this refiguring of the maps and everything, that we really look into how have these lots been used for the last 50, 60, 75 years. Some of them are still being used that way. How about if we look at maybe adjusting a little bit and saying instead of just the stroke of the pen on the map went thusly, maybe we should follow the lot line to include the current businesses that have been there forever, so that they can continue without having to go to the zoning board to get a variance when they have an owner change or have some work that needs to be done, and they find out that they are not truly in the zone that they thought they had been for years because the zone got changed.
So what you're suggesting is to change the description of the physical limits of the zone to match what is on the ground. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for putting it succinctly. And there's lots of history. If you asked, oh, what was in that building before? Well, unfortunately, I figure that I'm old now because I can remember it at the 60s. And certain businesses has always been in certain places that all of a sudden have become rural residential, you know what I mean? Or now they're on the Pine Hill bit.
Are you talking about the businesses on the left of 109A or going out on 20?
Yeah, when you take the corner going onto Elm Street.
So you mean like the old Paul's Family Shoe Store?
There you go. The moccasin place,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And I don't know what it was before then because there was a little house in the front. I can only go that far. As a 10-year-old getting shoes there. But
I can at least get to Paul's.
you can get there. A little farther there. But I mean, they've obviously been in business that long, so they shouldn't just all of a sudden pop up to like, oh no, that's only a residential area, you can't do that. And there was that other space farther out on the 28 that we had this same thing that things got changed, that they've had to do the same type of thing because a business wanted to go in. But yet we took up time with the zoning board trying to figure out, is this really the thing to do in a building that was built as a business? And they had to go just so that they could rent.
That's fine. So I think we understand Julie's intent, and we don't mean to settle this tonight.
No,
but
I'd
just
like
to
to put it on
consider
there.
adding this as an item for a work session in the future.
It's just something that has been squeezed and has now all of a sudden popped up like, oh, this can always be a problem. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. The next item is public comment. I don't see anybody here, so we'll,
I sent you another new business item to add to our agenda.
oh, yes, you did. Yes. Go ahead.
So because of recent activities, especially on Main Street where a building got torn down and replaced, it caused a bit of a hubbub in town, let's just say. And the Heritage Commission, we had quite a bit of discussion, and we have had ongoing discussions about whether or not a demolition delay ordinance should have handled something like that, where they would have had to notice the abutters, and it should have been considered. And so the Heritage Commission, and I am the planning board representative to it, has come up with language for an article, a demolition delay article, which I think the planning board should review and massage to, we decided, we talked to Jim Pinio about it, and he suggested it come through the planning board and not go as an independent warrant article. So what the Heritage Commission has done is propose something to bring to this group, and then whenever we start discussing it, there will be some people who have been working on this who will come and address concerns and thoughts and help with the discussion.
Yeah, so
if we want to bring it forward.
yes. So when you feel it's ready to present to the planning board,
It's ready.
All right. So let's get it on the calendar for a discussion.
Right. I sent you the link to it. I can send you the link, and so you
Yeah.
can share it with everybody.
Okay, so
Yeah, if
we
we
could
get it in
discuss
everybody's
it.
packet on the,
Yeah.
whatever evening we discuss it,
Right.
it can be included in the packet.
Yep, I will.
We could do that in May, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Leanne will have to talk about what we're going to do in the May work session. We don't have it planned out yet. So certainly we can figure that out. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The first one is February 11th.
Would you like me to start?
Sure.
On page 3, line 108, it should be circumference of 15 inches and a height of 4 feet above the ground.
Well, I would say not and a height, but at a height.
Are you
Yes.
suggesting maybe the word gets written
At a
out?
height of 4 feet above the ground.
I'm suggesting that we write out the word inches and feet, please.
Yes, I agree.
And then on page 5, the line 207 motion should be above the line 195 motion. And we should be granting the waivers, I think.
So you're reordering the
Yeah,
motions.
I mean, we voted to approve the waivers and then voted to accept it as complete. And this has it in the reverse order.
I think it's in the reverse order because that's the actual order in which it occurred.
Oh,
No?
okay.
I understand that that's not the correct order, but I think that's the order in which it happened.
Okay, at line 454 on page 10, it should be alluded, A-L-L-U-D-E-D.
Can you say that again? It should be what?
Where it says Ann Blodgett stated they eluded, it should be alluded.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was the word, okay. Notice I didn't have time to read mine. I'm hoping Roger catches them all.
There's, I think, just the one where I'm Roger Murphy. No, that may be the other one. I think that's everything I have.
So I have a question. I think it's 4.5 feet above the ground.
No, the statute's 4 feet.
The shoreland is 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're talking to a forester, the DBA is 4.5, but the statute actually, because I looked at it, it's 4 feet, the scenic road statute.
Okay,
If you want to check me, I've got the,
I believe you.
Any other corrections or comments? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the February 11th, 2025 minutes as amended by Roger.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. The next is the consideration of minutes for Tuesday, April 1st, 2025.
And on these minutes where you have, I think it's called the I'm not going to get the name right, the sign for and, the
Ampersand.
yeah, it adds AMP, I think each time it appears in the minutes. So for example, on page 2 on line 87, it's Beth Tomasello and AMP Philip Quateraro. And that's pretty consistent throughout, I believe.
So you're saying you don't want it?
No,
You don't want the amp.
There's a computer issue, not just in these minutes, but everywhere, where if you put in an ampersand,
Yeah.
some computers interpret that as ampersand AMP, and it adds the letters AMP.
Oh, really? Oh, that's bizarre.
Yes, it's
Oh.
very common in databases.
Now, which I don't
It's
use.
that old A1 sauce problem.
And then at the top of page 4, line 144, I'm not sure what, it says, Mr. Blank referred to the tie and bond engineering review and agreed with their comments made to address.
So it seems like the end of that sentence is missing.
Yeah. And if
Or
we
does
want
it
to get
just
picky
continue?
in line 147, it should be test pits and infiltration testing are currently being completed.
I think Julie was about to make a
Yeah,
suggestion on.
145 there, comments made to address the planner review comments will also be met. Yes? No? Does that make sense that maybe there's an extra period?
It seems like it's,
No?
I'm guessing it's the tie and bond report. That is what it,
Agree with their comments
I think
made
Roger's guess is accurate.
to address.
So on line 154, almost at the end, I think plan set is 2 words.
It is.
And if you go to line 152, where your Mr. Blank clarified that the yield was not there for the use as it is a different use, I think that should be clarified by saying for a, was not there for a prior use, but this is a different use. I think he's referring to the Alzheimer thing, which didn't get enough water. And then on page 7, on line 3, 323, where it says they have few parking spots, but Mr. Santoro offered to let the church utilize some of their parking when needed. On page 8, line 363, there's no G in Vaughan.
Well, thank you.
I'm looking after you here. And then we get into a flurry of the AMPs on page 9. And then on line 105, I think it was Roger Murray who noted the addition of hyphens.
And what line was that, Roger?
505. And that's it.
Any other comments or corrections?
Where did Roger just say there was a flurry of ampersands? Because I'm not seeing them.
No, he said that they were scattered through the document.
And they're on page, well, there's some on page 10.
Ampersands. Ampersands are all over the place.
Yes, and they all have AMPs after them.
Do they?
Yep.
That I hadn't noticed.
It's a new power source.
Super duper. Now I can't even find one to look at.
If you look at line 434, for example.
34. And amp. Oh, there. But I was just going way back to the beginning where you started with the names.
Maybe you can search
All right,
for it.
so
On page 2,
Yeah.
and they're fine. That's
So
Tomasello and
certainly
Philip Portola.
they can go through and find all the ampersands. That's easy enough to do, as well as the majority of all the other corrections.
Yeah.
The only unknown is on line 145, the end of that sentence. We're not clear on what that should be. And do we want to approve these minutes without knowing what that should be?
Well, do we think I have a good guess?
Yeah, I think you have a good guess as well. I'm fine with moving on. I just wanted to make that point.
Should we propose our guess?
I'm sorry?
Should we produce our completion? So Leanne can write it and then we're done?
What is your guess?
Yeah. Roger, why don't you put in the proposed language?
That line, beginning with line 144, Mr. Blanc referred to the time bond engineering review and agreed with their comments made. Agreed with their comments made to address the time bond report. Yeah.
Okay. I'd make a motion to approve those minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I abstain.
Thank you, Peter. And I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.